To Google is part of everyone's vocabulary now, and yet Google is more than just a search engine. It has a multitude of businesses under its banner. Amazingly, Google is only 15 years old, and Dan Cobley has been head of the most important market outside of the United States for the last 2 years, the UK and Ireland. But Dan has been with Google for the last 7 years, which equates to nearly half of Google's corporate life. It's a business that has grown annual global revenues from $11 billion when Dan started to $50 billion in 2012. That must have been some 7 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Cobley.
Hello, everyone. What a great honor it is to be here today. I'd like to start with a show of hands. How many people in the audience this week have used a Google service? Google, Gmail, Maps? OK, pretty much all of you. And amazingly, as Ian said, 15 years ago, that would have been 0. So in my view, what's driven the transition from 0 to billions of users around the world and millions of advertising partners around the world in those short few years has been our focus on innovation, and particularly on what we call 10x innovation, seeking innovation which is not striving to move things to be 10% better, but to be 10 times better. And following on from Joanna's great tips, I want to talk about Google's approach to that challenge. And so I'll start from the beginning. 15 years ago, Larry and Sergey were a couple of students at Stanford University. They were working on a research project crawling the web, indexing the web. They started to get quite a lot of users. They got their first investment check, and they moved out of their dorm rooms into this Silicon Valley garage. There was nobody happier with that than Larry's roommate, because he was sharing a room not just with Larry, but with all of Larry's servers, and his dorm room was incredibly hot and noisy. But they moved into this garage, and as 2 young men with a garage and a few servers, they came up with this mission to organize the world's information. Incredibly audacious and ambitious thing to say for 2 such young men. But I think it's having that kind of bold vision that you can galvanize your organization around, which drives the sense of innovation which we've seen. So to go from 2 people to more people, they needed to hire good people. And in 1999, they hired about 40 people. Within those 40 was their first salesperson, and in the same year, their first chef. So a nice indication of the company culture they were setting up. But to grow further, they needed to get more engineers. And the kind of engineers we're looking for is not just coders, but people that we call curious innovators. And I think the best illustration of that is this recruitment poster that went up outside MIT and outside Stanford early in our life. I don't know if anybody knows the answer. No? So E is the mathematical constant, the exponential number. It's a number that you might remember from school as 2.71828182459, and it goes on. But if you get to digit 99, from digits 99 to 109 is a 10-digit number, which is a prime number, the first one in that sequence. You put that prime number into a search into a browser, followed by .com. At the time, it would have taken you to a page. That page would have asked you to solve a number of other maths and programming problems. And notice, there's no prize on this. There's no branding. People just did that because they were curious. When they got to that last page, finally it said, "This is Google. You seem like the kind of person who would thrive in our organization. Send us your resume." And through that process, we got a lot of interest, and we hired a lot of great engineers. But most importantly, we hired curious problem solvers, the kind of people who seek to solve a problem, not because they're asked to or told to, but because it's there. Now, obviously, hello? sorry, go back one. Obviously, when you bring these people in, you want them not just to be curious problem solvers, but also to be motivated and excited by their work. And what we've done here is we've given people the concept of 20% time that you may have heard of. So all of our engineers are asked not just to work on what their manager or their team is working on, but also to spend up to 20% of their time working on stuff that excites them. And to illustrate that point, sorry, go back to play the video now, I want to talk about MapMaker. So we had a bunch of engineers that were working in India, and they were working on making maps better for rich people in developed markets while they were living in India. At the time, only 15% of the world's surface was accurately mapped. That didn't include the places they lived. So what they did is they used their 20% time to design this that you can see here. It's a web-based interface that lets you look at a satellite image of the world and then draw onto it with lines and shapes, the roads and the places of interest, and label them to create maps. And as a result of them following their passion to solve something they cared about, they developed a tool which has now mapped the majority of the world's surface through the contribution of volunteers. Okay, we can play that out. Now, obviously you want to give them exciting work to do, but you also want to give them a great environment in which to work. This is our head office here in London. And if you go inside, then you'll see nice restaurants offering free food, you'll see cool breakout spaces, and you'll see some quirky features. Now, this may all seem kind of extravagant and juvenile, but actually it's very, very well researched and studied, and we know that these things drive innovation. We put people into tightly packed, open-plan desks where they're close together and they communicate well, and then we give them spaces to come away from the day-to-day and then brainstorm and ideate and invent. But also, we drive what we call those serendipitous interactions. And that's where people meet their colleagues in an unplanned way. So if you go to our restaurants, we specifically manage the queues not to be too short, because we know when people are in lines for their food, they'll chat to the people alongside them. They'll exchange ideas. Those ideas will become projects. Those projects will become innovations, using the 20% time often. We also have large tables in our canteen so that you sit with people more than the ones you just walked in with. And in fact, I saw some other research that shows that this isn't just about the tech industry. Some call centers in the north of England were studied, and they showed that the one thing that drove collaboration more than anything else was allowing people to take their break times together and putting bigger tables in the coffee room. So there's a tip for all of you. So, a great working space. Next, I want to talk about having fun. You saw some fun elements in those pictures, but this is about the example of Android. We had a young marketing guy in California called Z Wang who had the idea that it would be great to demonstrate the resilience of Android phones by sending one up into space using one of these high-altitude weather balloons. So we put Tom, our little mascot here, on a polystyrene base, on a weather balloon with the Android phone alongside him, taking the filming here. And you can see it went up at a certain altitude. The pressure allows the balloon to burst. The thing comes back down to Earth. And all the time, it's capturing data, which we plan to put up on the website. Poor Tom, you can see, had a rather exciting journey. That yellow rope there in a moment comes free. And Tom doesn't make it. But the phone does make it. And found by its GPS tracker, they retrieved the phone, they put the data that was recorded, including the altitude of 10,000 feet and the temperature of -50 degrees C, and they put that up on a blog, along with the video on YouTube, and hundreds of thousands of people watched the video. So what started as a bit of fun became a fabulous piece of marketing for us. One of the people that watched that video happened to work at NASA. They were planning the next official NASA space mission, and they realized that this Android device could be a lower-cost instrument reader than the stuff they had been planning before. They got in touch, they put them on the spacecraft, and we got another great press cycle. So again, what started as a piece of fun became a great piece of marketing for our business. But it's not all about fun. We're also serious about making the right decisions. And what you can see here illustrates the point. You might remember from way back when Google started, we had 10 blue links down the right-hand side, which were the links to the advertising. When we launched Gmail, there was also blue links, but we realized after a while that they were slightly different shades of blue. Now, in most organizations, there's a very, very dangerous beast in the boardroom. He's called the HIPPO. Does anybody know what the HIPPO is? The HIPPO is the highest paid person's opinion. Typically, it rules the boardroom, very dangerous. At Google, wherever possible, we try to use data to trump the HIPPO. And in this case, this wasn't a critical design decision. It wasn't a logo. It was a functional link, and we wanted to choose which blue was right. Typical HIPPO organization asks a marketing manager or marketing director. In our organization, we ran a series of 1% experiments, which is where we take 1% of our audience and we get them to see just that shade of blue. 1% sees another shade of blue, and we see which one gets clicked on most. We also showed 40 other shades of blue. So we had a spectrum of 42 shades of blue. We showed them to different people. We saw which one clicked on most. We learned that consumers prefer and click on more a slightly more purple blue versus a slightly greener blue. And you might think, gee whiz, you just wasted 18 seconds of my life telling me that. But it's important to us because the scale of our business means those additional clicks were worth $200 million a year to us. So thank God the HIPPO didn't decide. Talking about data, in 2004, we launched Gmail. How many remember using web-based email around that time, 2003, 2004? You might remember that you had very limited storage capacity. You had to every now and again go and delete emails with attachments. You could get a maximum of 25 megabits of storage with a free web-based account. Thinking about 10x thinking, we thought, how can we make that vastly different and better? And we launched Gmail with 1,000 megabits of storage, 40 times better than the alternative offering. Now, we actually launched it on April the 1st. We had a bit of a history of doing April Fool's gags, which confused some people. Some of my favorites from the past are Pigeon Rank, the idea that pigeons choose the search results. Translate for animals, where you could speak into your phone, or your dog or cat could speak into your phone, and it would tell you what they were saying, which was actually very useful. And my favorite, which was the TISP, the Toilet Internet Service Provision, where you could get a special cable from Google, flush it down your loo, and you'd get free high-speed internet. No jokes about logging on, please. But so we launched on April the 1st. People thought it was a joke. And those who thought harder about it just thought it was crazy, because they realized that had a large number of people immediately adopted the gigabyte of free storage we were offering, the cost of delivering that would have crippled us for a free service, and it would have done. But we realized through Moore's law, that some of you will know, that the cost of technology halves roughly every 12 to 18 months. And we knew that the cost of delivering this storage was going to fall more quickly than the usage of that storage would rise. So we could afford to offer something that was market-beating by far. And so the lesson out of this is, if you're developing something based on a technology, design it for the technology you know will exist at the point it comes to mass market, not for the technology you have today, because technology moves so fast. Now, there's a great quote I love, which is, if you want to predict the future, then invent it. And it's something that we try to do as much as possible. So with broadband, or with internet connections, the speed of delivery has increased massively over time. And with every increase in speed, there's been an increase in things that people do with it. People have gone from text pages to voice over IP to YouTube videos to multi-person video conferencing in high definition. And we want to know what kind of products and services are going to be used by the internet when it's 100 times faster than it is today. And we figured the best way to learn that was to give it to people and see what they did with it. So what we're doing in Kansas right now is we're going through Kansas City and offering broadband fiber connections, which are 1 gigabit in speed, which is 40 times faster than I can get where I live here, to everybody. And we're going to sit back and watch and learn about what that means for how people use the internet. And it's early days yet, but one thing we've already seen is a tweet, which was my favorite, from somebody in New York, that said, I'm leaving the Big Apple and going to Kansas City because that's where the future is being invented. Now, I'm sure that's never been said about Kansas City before, but it was kind of fun for us. Now, everything I've spoken about so far is sort of under the umbrella of organizing the world's information and making it accessible. But we also realized a little while ago that there are some big problems that can be solved by technology that can move the world, the planet forward, which don't fit under that umbrella. So for that, we started this thing called Google X, or the Google X Labs, which was called by the New York Times Google's Lab of Wildest Dreams. Now, the best way to think about that is it's a team that is tasked with inventing and launching moonshot technologies that make the world a radically better place. It's the intersection of a huge problem, a radical solution enabled by a breakthrough technology. And the best way to illustrate that is with a short film.
The actual moonshot is wonderful, inspirational, poetic, beautiful, involved great technical challenges, genuine heroism. It brought the world together. But think about the Polynesian islander on the dugout canoe, deciding one day they were going to go that way. No one had ever been that way before. No one even knew if there was anything that way before. It was amazing, and it changed the world.
People can set their minds to magical, seemingly impossible ideas, and then through science and technology, bring them to reality. And that then sets other people on fire, that other things that look impossible might be accomplishable.
Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there.
Everyone else in the world is working on that next 10%. If you can be the one that delivers that 10 times improvement, you have a chance to really change things.
If you want cars to run at 50 miles per gallon, fine, you can retool your car a little bit. But if I tell you it has to run on a gallon of gas for 500 miles, you have to start over.
You need a lot of courage in this work, and you need a lot of persistence. Even if you don't really 100% believe it's possible, like you might think this might be possible, have the courage to try. That's how the greatest things have happened.
You don't spend your time being bothered that you can't teleport from here to Japan, because there's a part of you that thinks it's impossible. Moonshot thinking is choosing to be bothered by that.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Humanity's progress has been a series of amazing, audacious things, from the very small and personal up to the great, big, and grand. And we are a species of moonshots. And to me, that's like the really amazing, poetic, and inspirational thing.
When you find your passion, you're unstoppable. You can make amazing things happen. It's been true through all of history.
When Kennedy said that we would put a man on the moon, it's about the fact that he said, we don't know how to do this yet, and we're gonna do it anyway. And that sends chills up everybody's spine. Because if that happens, what couldn't we do?
So to go to the first example of an output from the Google X Lab, I've got driverless cars. Some of you may have seen this. But the Venn diagram idea here is that the big problem is that every year, 1.1 million people around the world die in road traffic accidents. The breakthrough solution, the radical solution, is recognizing the fact that most of those accidents are caused by human beings, by slow reactions, tiredness, drunkenness, whatever. So the radical solution is to take the human out of the car. And the breakthrough technology is amazing advances in, if we see it here on the video, amazing advances in mapping and in sensor technology that allows a car to control itself. And what you can see here is a video of an actual driverless car, which is the green one in the middle, and you can see what the car sees around it and how it's controlling its journey along the road. Now, these vehicles have done 500,000 miles through the streets of California since we started testing, and they've been involved in only 2 accidents. In both cases, the driverless car was stationary, and a drivered vehicle drove into the back of them. Just illustrates the point. The next thing, Google Glass. You can see I'm wearing these here today. Still very much a prototype, but the idea here is that we all are on our phones incessantly the whole day, and wouldn't it be great if the phone just got out of the way and you could have something right in front of your face that could give you the answers. So on my Google phone today, assuming I've got a good connection, I can already do something like, let's just log in. How long is the Brooklyn Bridge?
Brooklyn Bridge has a length of 1,825 meters.
So since our phones can already do that, wouldn't it be great if that was already always there in front of our eyes as we're doing our sightseeing, as we're getting directions, as we are checking in at the airport, as we're walking around an unknown site? And wouldn't it be great if we could take pictures without having to use our hands? Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to jump over the next video, but there's a video which you can all look at online if you search for Google Glass, which shows some of the things that might be possible. And the last thing from the X Lab, which just launched recently, is a project called Project Loon. Now, Project Loon is recognizing the big issue that for many, many people in rural and less developed parts of the world, they just don't have access to this amazing internet data that we all have become to rely on. And so we've started testing these very high altitude balloons, which will allow that internet signal to be carried. And illustrated here, you can see the signal is bounced up to a balloon, it's bounced across a network of balloons, and then beamed down to people, giving 3G type speeds to incredibly remote locations. Now, what kind of place invents these things? This is what it looks like inside the Google X building, very much back to the look and feel of Larry and Sergey's original garage from the beginning. And these people are real makers. They're tinkerers, they're prototypers. And this picture shows the evolution of the Google Glass that I'm wearing today over a very short period. Larry, the guy in charge, said, I want a complete new, from the ground up prototype every month for the first 6 months. And that's what we got here. So it's forcing real innovation through prototyping. And then finally, I think what's the common thread through so many of the things that have made us successful as a company so far is challenging ourselves to think not 10%, but 10x. So think about in your businesses. If you currently have a product that takes 10 days to make, or a delivery process that takes 10 days to deliver, and you want to get that to 9 days, then you can probably do that by squeezing and tweaking your existing process. But if you want to get that to next day, then you have to fundamentally change how you operate your businesses. And that's the kind of innovation which is going to give you a leap ahead of the competition and really give you a chance to win and grow significantly. So I'd leave you with the final question. What is your X? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. After that, it's so much fun. I think my question's a little bit dull. I wonder if I could spice it up a little bit, asking you a tricky question or something.
And I think probably the question on everybody's lips is one about tax, because I'm asked that wherever I go.
I would spice it up a bit. Did George Osborne get you on his way out?
I didn't catch George in the corridor, but I would say, as we've said publicly many times, that of course we pay all the tax that we're required to pay in every market in which we operate. But I think what's more interesting is that governments around the world offer tax breaks and incentives for companies to come and operate there, and they make a difference. So one of the reasons we chose to put our European headquarters into Dublin was because at the time, the Dublin government, the Irish government, was offering very valuable incentives to companies like ours, which we've taken advantage of. And I think overall, I think we should all recognize that governments set the tax rules and the incentive structures that corporations like us play by. They set the rules that we play by. And if they don't like how we play, then it's up to them to change the rules.
Thank you. Google's famously had a very flat structure with very little middle management.
Yep.
Does that still exist in a $300 billion value business, or is it now changing as you've got so large?
So scaling is a problem for all businesses, but I think we've done a pretty good job of trying to keep no more than 8 layers between the most junior people and the very top of the organization. Also, I think being flat is more than just about the structure. It's all about the philosophy and the organization. So one thing that we do, I think, very well, and more than I've seen anywhere else, is that we're open with information within the organization. So we are nearly 40,000 people, and yet every quarter, when our chairman, Eric Schmidt, does his presentation to the board of the shareholders, he then shares that presentation the following week with 45,000 people on a video conference and shares everything. And so having access to that corporate strategy and to those things that would often be secret in other companies, I think gives us a flat feeling that you don't get elsewhere.
It's fascinating. Also, your innovation time off, you mentioned it in your presentation there. That's a day a week, 20%. Could other businesses do that sort of commitment?
I think, not just could, I think they must if they're going to innovate. I think what it allows us to do is to attract fabulous engineers and innovators because they come into a place where they can pursue their passions. And it allows us to seed and bubble up amazing ideas from people that are very close to those things and very passionate about solving them. And so while, yes, it might be a day a week, it's incredibly productive. And if you look at products like MapMaker, like Google News, like Gmail, like AdSense, they've all come out of those 20% projects. So without that structure, we wouldn't be half the company we are today. Okay.
Now, you also help startups. What sort of advice, I mentioned it with Joanna Shields, what sort of advice would you give to somebody who is a new entrepreneur in this fast-moving world?
Firstly, I'd say never compromise on hiring. It's incredibly tempting when you're growing to think, I desperately need people, let's just get a bum on a seat. But it's better to wait and get the right bum than get a bum quickly. So never compromise on hiring. Be open with your information, as I said. And then lastly, as you'll see in the panel later on, the businesses that are growing fastest now are the ones that recognize that their market is not defined by the geography in which they work. It's defined by the geography of the web, and that's global. And so you can have a global market within weeks of launch if you really understand how the internet can support you.
Now, you've teased us with a number of new things that are coming onto the market. What do you think? I mean, you've seen some radical changes. What do you think is going to be the thing that our children are going to really get excited about in 10 years' time?
My children were very excited when I brought this home last week, I can tell you. But I don't know about 10 years' time, but I think the thing that's going on right now is the power of all the information that's stored in the cloud and the ease of accessing that to totally reinvent products and categories. So if you go onto Amazon or into PC World right now, the fastest selling laptops are Chromebooks, which have no local storage and no local programs, and they're all running through the browser into the cloud. A device like this can only operate because it's exchanging its information with the cloud. And I think the businesses that harness the power of the data that exists in the cloud are really going to profit.
Dan Cobley, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you got everything?